Blessed love and peace. Uh, Drunk off self and feeding off each other. World society. What we observe is world society in the recent generations, the past few hundred years, devolves significantly within a collective culture and multiculture of narcissism. It's the pervasiveness, the proliferation of individualism, the antithesis of feudalism, liberty, and the excesses of that are exacerbated through the emergence and the ascendance of science and mass production, weaponry, agriculture, as well as other devices for individual pleasure and individual motivation. Sensual, from food to sex, drugs, and otherwise, and trinkets. So, global, world culture, world society, narcissism, everyone, the rationales that substantiate the pursuits of individualisms, and in those individualisms, the isolation and increasing susceptibility, vulnerability, actuality of subordination, subjugation, enslavement, and then complaining that one's narcissism doesn't seem to be as pleasurable as another person's narcissism. Ego. And that's where we are today. No system, no blaming system. It's society. It's each individual. So we only have ourselves to blame, and we only have ourselves to empower. Yet beyond the notions in pimp talk of empowerment, it is balance. Balance. It's not about power, it's about balance. And in the civilizational paradigm of Eastern Hemisphere and Western Hemisphere, Western civilization and native tradition, native relationship, the transcendent translation of that dichotomy of Eastern civilization and Western civilization. Did I mix that up there? If you follow, you follow. Eastern Hemisphere is Western civilization. You get that now? Okay. So, in that dichotomy of the transcendent nature of Eastern Hemisphere, Western civilization, and Western Hemisphere, native tradition. This is what we observe at this moment as the essence of way of communicating it. In Eastern Hemisphere, Western civilization, and Western civilization includes Asia. Chains off the brains. Eastern Hemisphere, Western civilization. The essential nature is mathematics, utilizing the wheel for the expression of mathematics, whether it's actual arithmetic, the abacus, algebra, geometry, calculus, and otherwise, physics and all that, mathematics. That's the way the wheel turns. The Dharma wheel is utilized for those purposes. It's the fusion, Eurasia. The Western Hemisphere and native tradition utilizes the wheel for medicine, relationship, the four directions of the wind. So it's these two dichotomies of world civilization that are emerging at the moment. This is the era that we are in, and the reconciliation amidst this. All the advantages and all the corruptions of both of these methodologies, of both of these ways, we are navigating and negotiating at this very moment. The systems and institutions and behavior, discipline. So, that's that. That's where we find ourselves. That's us. That's what's happening. Sparrows climbing on bricks and flying off like nothing happens. Um. So, and there's further. Um. Now, amidst that, with that awareness, like we each have our decisions, we each have our proclivities. We are born in certain geographies. Those geographies have certain natures, and so there's a reason for all this. Now, with this experience of the confluences amidst East and West, amidst all the migrations, geographic, socioeconomic, ethno-cultural, and otherwise, religiosities, all the migrations, amidst all these migrations, here's something beneficial to consider in guiding us through these navigations and guiding us how we make our decisions and discriminations in these migrations and navigation. Names and numbers. Some people have proclivities and affinities and priorities concerning names, and some people have affinities, proclivities, and priorities concerning numbers. Much of Western civilization is predicated upon numbers at this moment. Science, numbers, boxes, and then calculations and algorithms concerning those boxes. That's a numbers emphasis. And there's degrees of how much we prioritize numbers over names and names over numbers. So numbers is just, again, box, numbers, demographics, polls, statistics, analytics, sports itself being reduced to just numbers. And there's tremendous efficacy in numbers, the engineering in additionally, but there's also tremendous malaise and pollution from the numbers as well, because there's a whole lot of miscalculation and Mr. Calculations. All right, so that's numbers. Now we get into the names. The names is the relationship, the stories, the narratives, the abstract, the heavenly, the otherworldly, the celestial, nature, animals, plants, the elements. That's names. And it's interesting, actually, I'm riffing right here, but the names have a further earthly tendency of being divisive, actually, because I call that blue. No, that's azul. No, that's whatever. We have different names for the same. I gotta stop saying MF. I've been in that trope recently, and that's telling. So, but we have so many different names for the same thing: God, love, truth, Emet, Ek Onkar. It's the same thing, and we have so many different names, and we get so contentious in this worldly experience over our different names for the same thing. So names, that's that thing. Now with the numbers have further earthly universality. Numbers is numbers, and that's many people's proclivity. When people have this interest of world empathy, and additionally, still the ragamuffin. There's still that proclivity towards mathematics and numbers, because it is what it is. Now we also know that mathematics have the susceptibility of being biased and subjective and oppressive, misleading, and misleading. If we're gonna let's get off that. Let's stop with the cuteness at the moment. And then the names are what guide us into the meaning and the transcendent beyond the names. Dao ke dao, fei chong dao, ming ke ming, fei chong ming. And that's something the numbers are unable to do. Numbers, we can get into numerology, we can get into Gematria. I keep saying Gematria. Um, and like there's tremendous insight and revelation that occurs through the numbers, through the calendars and the mathematics, but it's with a conscientiousness of the transcendent beyond the numbers. So and it's the names that provide that the numbers with that type of context and meaningfulness, because if it's numbers alone, um, it's just numbers alone. So anyways, names and numbers, again recognizing that much of Western civilization at this moment is significantly entrenched and like rigidly entrenched, woefully entrenched in numbers, to the point of not even looking at people's names, and not and that's very devaluing. It's either dehumanizing or superhumanizing, because what is human? Um, but it overlooks people's being, and a lot of presumptions and a lot of devaluation, and a lot of riches off the numbers. So for each of us, it's a matter of recognizing it and then finding out where our balance is in that, amidst the names and the numbers, amidst the numbers and the names. And it's not an absolute either or kind of thing. It's a matter of what we prioritize, and how much, to what degree, and in what ways, and just to be mindful of that and not to be bad. So, um, unless not mad meaning mad, but mad meaning good. Ugh. Run, DMC. I crack myself up. Again, I got the alfalfa joint going on here. Does not know if that qualifies as covering my dome and keeping the humidity. So this is the temple. So it's right on the edge. Anyways, there is the law. There's the letter, and then there's the spirit. Continuing on. All right, so that's some of it. I talked before. I did endeavor to describe before the whole situation with the pornography joint. Again, just summarily and just simply, it's pain, it's affliction. We can call it evilness. We can call it devil. It's delving into hurtful experiences and pain, affliction all across the board. Everybody who's involved. Now, that being said, how do I rationalize or otherwise my involvement in recent days? Pain and affliction. Here's the. Am I doing this now? Okay. All right. So, very briefly, the summary is this. What I was trying to articulate before is that living immediately with imposed soft-core pornography conditions, such that, with the susceptibility of, at any one moment, at any brief moment, getting enveloped in direct fornication, particularly from the chronic imposition and conditioning of softcore pornography. And it's only myself to blame, as a way of mitigating the adverse effects. And okay, there's also, amidst the chronic softcore pornography imposition of just walking the streets, and additionally, even when becoming effective in avoiding that and being disciplined with that, there is an increasing approach of sodomite pornography, sodomite imposition, and the disorientations according to that. So amidst all these conditions, and then also obstructions concerning healthy relationship, marriage, such that when having a conversation, when building a rapport, and building conversation towards marriage, all types of interference, subterfuge, hate, mud throwing, and additionally, being involved. So those three trifectas in just doing the normal walk of life at the moment. Imposition of softcore pornography. Actually, it's four. Actually, all right, it's one with three. How do I categorize this? I'll just say four things. There's four things. One is the imposition of the forced imposition, to be clear about it, of soft core pornography experience, living in a soft core pornography environment, like a red light district. That's one thing, and that leads to the second thing of the susceptibility of getting enveloped in fornication, one way or the other, directly, and the severe consequences of that. In addition to that, amidst the softcore pornography compulsion, just all around, and whenever walking out the door, whenever going online, it's just the pervasiveness of the imposition of softcore pornography. Even when not falling to the temptation of fornication, there it becomes the increasing volume or loudness and approach of sodomite culture, approaches of suggestions, invitations, disorientations, and all different types of stuff in terms of sodomite activity, behavior, corruptions. That becomes increasingly loud, increasingly advancing in terms of like soliciting and otherwise, and that adds to further frustrations. And so then the fourth thing is increased interference in the cultivation of healthy relationship between man and woman. When a man and woman are meeting each other, and additionally, people coming out the woodworks to throw shade for many different motivations, for many different reasons. So those are the four conditions, and then that precipitate the experience of the pornography. So, and it's not an excuse, it's not a rationalization. It's an explanation to find a healthy solution. And one of the things that's considered for me sharing this is, just to be honest, before I even shared that, what was intended is to articulate the intention of cultivating a mindset of talking to 15 and 16-year-old young women, high schoolers. The rationale of that is the further relatability of this topic with such sistren kinfolk at that stage, at that area, in that stage of life, in that environment, being not completely innocent, as well as being not completely corrupted either. And thus there being a certain amount of honesty. Part of that also involves recognizing that 15 and 16-year-old sistren are the shot callers of world society at this moment. And they're not the top dogs, though. 15, 16-year-old sistren are not the top dogs. But recognizing that 15 and 16-year-old sistren who are menstruating, who are capable of having children, who are developed in terms of body, physique, and sexual prowess, and still developing different lines of progression in terms of maturity, physical maturity. But the point is that the sistren have, generally speaking, have an increased knowledge about the ways of the world. It seems easy to see the corruptions of the men around the sistren without necessarily revealing that, but just like know the different games, still learning maybe some of it, and know like it's cutthroat competition. Sistren are at each other, sistren posse up, and are at each other too. But the thing about it particularly is that sistren, with this knowledge, obviously there are many kinfolk who have a certain knowledge um, about the ways of the world. But the sistren at the same time, one, particularly those who have a formidable security, being in the Father's house, still having the sanctuary of school and the protections of school, the formal protections of school, and so are in a window of access of the ways of the world, but at the same time having protections, both legally, familially, and furtherly. And so in that position, shot callers, because there's a lot of vying for such a sistren to go to universities and attract men, and additionally. And so sistren at that moment, at that stage of life, have a lot of opportunities of where to go. But at the same time, it has to be very prudent decisions, because it's a window. It's not a life guarantee, a lifelong guarantee. There's a window of a few years of making decisions. So it's a matter of optimizing those options and vying for further lucrative options, whether it's admissions to university or admissions to certain circles or otherwise. Some might focus on stacking money, whatever, or trying to find an independent thing, but that's the further corrupt kind of situation. The ideal situation is generally finding a marriage arrangement with a young man or a 20, 30-something-year-old man who has establishment and again, prospects. So, but that's because of that, men vie for women at that stage. Again, the semblance, if not actual virgins, like the near virgin experience and otherwise. So men from all ages are coveting the women, and that's why the women are shot callers to large world society, amidst all the Illuminati and everything else like that. So, however, like I said, the 15, 16-year-old sistren are not the top dogs, because the 15 and 16-year-old sistren are subordinate, effectively, to the prepubescent boys who are in love with the 15 and 16-year-old sistren and empower this 15 and 16-year-old sistren. And we get into the cosmic zone at that point. But it's not an explicit thing. It's we call it the tease game or the thirst trapping, whatever. But the prepubescent boys super powered. And so when and again, it's beyond volition, it's beyond the intentionality. And so when the prepubescent boys have a crush on a girl that they see who is well developed and still seems nice and pretty and everything else like that, like he thinks about her, he dreams about her, he wants her, not even just like in a salacious way, but just like in an increasingly honest way. And the 15, 16-year-old sistren are empowered by that. And so the plausibility of actual relationship marriage is less. Usually people want a boy to marry or a man to marry somebody who's younger than himself. But at the same time, the boy is becoming like introduced into the world and getting ready for puberty and everything else like that. And so it's natural for the boy to have that type of yearning. Though the prepubescent boys are somewhat ahead of the joint for the sistren, but the prepubescent boys tend not to have the same level of awareness about the world society, and so less of the shot caller directly concerning the world conditions. Some prepubescent boys are very much knowledgeable, not necessarily comprehensively or all the way knowledgeable, but some don't sleep, war games and otherwise. But that's not the top dogs either, because the top dogs above the prepubescent boys are prepubescent girls who have the same knowledge that the 15 and 16-year-old sistren do, the same observance of what's going on additionally. Way secure in the veil of not acknowledging it, and way further secure in the protections of the home. And the thing of the susceptibility of the prepubescent sistren, the young girls, is that the young girls fall in love with the young boys, and so just as the young boys have the crush on the young women, 15, 16-year-old women, and empower the 15, 16-year-old women through that affection, the boys also are protected and secured through the affection of the girls, because the girls have superpowers. Anyways, that's what we observe. So all that being said, what I'm articulating now is for the 15 and 16-year-old sister. 15 and 16-year-old brethren are generally busy, either one, losing the heads, meaning like just getting caught up in the sensual pleasures, particularly what we observe from today. Just like it's too easy, it's all over. It's like, and brethren's heads are going, and the brethren who have some semblance of their heads are in many ways already like cultivating their affiliations and allegiances. So there's always a propensity for adjustments and otherwise, and they're late bloomers, and there are those who are like hidden. I was essentially hidden, off in the cut, didn't socialize or whatever else. If I had socialized, I know like I would probably be a grandfather by now, and not even like whatever. But I was secluded from my obesity and other mechanisms, to be away from the regular socializing. So, and because of that, I got like, it was later in life that I began to become further aware of what's going on. There's only so much that TV shows during those days. I already say a blessing for this. So for the 15, 16-year-old sister, about the pornography, that's basically what I just described. Recognizing that conditions within society, just walking the streets, going to the store, I'm trying to like relate it into like the vehicle life, because I don't live with a vehicle. I have to walk wherever I go, and so maybe the vehicle life is further like isolated, and like people can avoid a lot of the things. But for kinfolk like myself, there is the necessity of hitting the streets and dealing with what all the signals and everything else like right in front of me at this moment of what's going on. So all that being said, there's increasing susceptibility to the people, the corruptions around oneself, and that includes the softcore pornography culture, women dressing half naked, and it being the norm, it being imposed. So that establishes considerable vulnerability for a spiritual man, a religious man, a man who's cultivating a discipline of chastity, celibacy, and otherwise. And when a man is practicing that celibacy and is without that means of directing those energies and those thoughts in a healthy and productive direction and path, the man becomes increasingly susceptible to influences. So again, the prospect or the immediacy of fornication, of actually not even approaching a woman, but just saying yes when a woman approaches him, and that is a severe pain. I mean, that is severe affliction. There are tremendous harms that occur through fornication, through direct sexual intercourse between a man and a woman. Severe, particularly the further mature kinfolk are in the game, and otherwise severe consequences. So that's very much to be avoided as much as possible. The second scenario, like I said, is or amidst the imposition of the softcore pornography. The second scenario is the sodomite culture imposing itself, and it's in many ways. It's friendly people coming up and kind of playing that game, and it's the energy of nihilism. It's like a rebelliousness, and it's a relatability. It's in kinfolk who are genius, kinfolk who are extremely intelligent, manipulators, and everything else like that, and know a lot of the interior dialogue, the interior experience of a man, particularly in that situation, seeing that's a vulnerable one. And so, okay, pursuing some basics about that person's psychology, and then how to get in and what to glean from that person. Even just being seen with such a one cultivates a certain amount of trust for that manipulator to talk with others. So there are a number of different motivations for um, gaslighting and manipulating a man who is um, single, decent, and otherwise. And that has adverse effects in a number of different ways because it influences a man about how he perceives the world, and additionally, it further emasculates his psyche in terms of uh, just perceiving world and relationship, and particularly that formidability of just like yo being macho, not being macho, being masculine, and like saying what's what, and not relying upon other people to speak his mind and everything else like that, or do his protection or otherwise. And when a man becomes conditioned through that kind of genteel male interaction or otherwise, and like subordination, like that friendly, genteel subordination from another man, it renders the victim, or renders the recipient less um, stand up or formidable to be a protector and a provider for a woman, to be in a relationship with him, because he becomes increasingly conditioned towards being taken care of, towards being the subordinate, and additionally. And so that's it's a long-term grift in many ways, but once a person is observed as being in that kind of thing, then it just becomes a regular trope where kinfolk just approach and just like kind of do that thing of kind of talking to that man like a girlfriend. And that sounds like trippy, whatever, but it's basically like that's like the mind fuckery involved, and it's friendly, it's supportive, but at the same time it's subordinating, and it's distracting. So, anyways, that's just one methodology. I mean, then there's the blatant, just outright flaming sodomy and whatever else, and the intentions are multi are diverse. Some of it is a way of just softening and weakening a man, and just becoming further docile, like I said, and being less strength, having less strength to be supportive and like protecting and forthgoing in being in a relationship with a woman. Some of it also is a matter of just infuriating a man, making him mad, and in that in that in that tactic, the man's anger works against himself. And so again, it's also applies towards. I know, the rice is here. It also applies towards distracting a man from his work, like right now, and going on tangents and losing focus, and not receiving the insight and the guidance and the inspiration that he would otherwise receive when staying on task, delaying those that priority of being in a relationship with a woman, and additionally, there's something else. Okay, so that's some of the things in terms of like the susceptibility to the sodomy culture when a man is being celibate. Uh, and uh, Again, it's just a softening and a softening and a softening, and it's only man only has himself to blame. I only have myself to blame when being in those conditions. But part of that is at some point a man's got to be a man, and there's in the relationship between a man and a woman, there is a certain amount of mutually agreeable, consensual subordination of like a man being like, this is what I want you to do, and a woman being like, this is what I want you to do. And so uh, in that experience of celibacy, the man tends to exist in the realm of placating or accommodating others, and it's a lot of doing what others want to do because he's holding on them, he's holding back himself or otherwise of imposing himself because he's getting convoluted in the words right now as he was what he's doing. Um, However, that's some of it, and the point being that that primal like man being a man and a woman just acquiescing to his masculinity, uh, there is little substitution. There is few substitution for that type of experience. Pornography is one of those experiences, and it's not even actual because a woman is not actually submitting herself specifically exclusively to that man, right? It just, again, it lends itself to further pain and delusions and affliction. However, when it's I think I think at some point during this joint there was some kind of clearness about what I was articulating, what I am articulating. I think we're getting caught up in the words a little bit further here. So I gotta get the rice for a second. Oh, he's so masculine. So, yeah, like I said, it's difficult to describe this, and it requires concentration, and it's challenging, and there's all different types of predatoriness of just how to evaluate this. And like, this is the crux of existence on this earth. This is what the Buddha talks about. It's only in times of marriage when people talk about being less than and worse than. This is the epitome of that. And so all the predatoriness, all the corruptions within world society is epitomized and optimized within this experience of the relationship between man and woman. So what's the point of me sharing all this? Like, what do I solicit? What is the interest of what people get from what I'm articulating, and what do I want in that, from that, or whatever? Well-being, relationship, health, marriage. That's what is solicited from myself, and purpose for others. What others receive in this is an understanding about the conditions and contribution to healthier conditions within society, honesty, healthier relationship, and the support for healthier relationship for all kinfolk. Again, I'm addressing that, what I described at the beginning, which is drunk off self, the narcissistic culture, and that's pervasive around world society. And it's not a world system thing, it's not an Illuminati thing, it's each of us thing, and it's beyond each of our control either. We can be fierce monastic, celibate, monk, sadhu individuals, and that doesn't solve the problem, that doesn't solve the challenge, and particularly for those of us who stay in the householder stage of life, there is the requirement of reconciliation, of working with others and finding a solution together, a man and a woman together, but also a collective of society, some type of collective, a minyan or a sangha, or some group of people that support it, because that's what's necessary in this experience of civilization, even in being without civilization, even in being in the wilderness. It's just the numbers game. So at this moment, what is solicited from society, from world society, is just to be honest and recognize what's going on. And rather than just finding opportunities for condemning others and devaluing others and whatever else, particularly just as a means of getting higher status or rankings within the game and the hustle and the narcissism and the nihilism, to be honest about what's going on for people's own well-being, and to support behavior, ethics, laws, rules, environments, initiatives, projects, communities, groups, that promote the well-being of people, the genuine well-being. We're not talking about charity. We're not talking about soup kitchens. We're talking about genuine well-being of kinfolk and the genuine well-being of relationships between kinfolk. And that requires a collective modesty within society to quell down, to calm down, to quiet up all this individual, I want to do this, I want to do that, I can do it, and recognize how much harm is being caused from that. I can wear what I want to wear. I can express myself how I want to express myself. You can't tell me. Yes, you can. But as the Brethren Ryan says, you can do whatever you want. You can say whatever you want, the N-word and otherwise. In the conversation that Brother Ryan was having with the sisterin of Asian Boss Girls, or whatever it's called, Peace and Blessings. You can do whatever you want. Just recognize there are consequences, whether you like it or not, whether you want to admit it or not. There are consequences. And that's on you when you hurt others. So that's what we're talking about. Just to be honest about this. Because even when you don't recognize the consequences and want to just pretend and hide in your bunkers, wherever that might be, you're still affected by it. There's no hiding from it. Secrecy is an illusion. And there is no justice on this earth. But there is justice in this life. So, we're already 40 minutes into this joint. And now I'm going to delve further into the... I don't know if I've been into the cringe too much. I think that I've been well established in terms of the awkwardness and the clumsiness and honesty amidst this, and the striving amidst this. So I don't know how much actually cringe it might be for those who are already preconditioned to my being and nature and ways. But now we're going to go into the further questionably cringe. And again, I there's recognition of the honesty of what I'm communicating. However, it's a matter of how it's perceived as well. So all that being said, again, for the purpose of well-being. Just honestly articulating this. I talked before about the telepathic vibration between a man who is even a grown man and otherwise, and sisterin who is, I was talking about virgin, and like the power of communication and connection even without saying anything, just vibes. And it's like, oh, that sounds so nasty. Understand what I'm saying and understand what is. It's not even what I'm saying. It's understand what is. And recognize the corruptions that exist at this moment, which precipitate this phenomena. Because, all right, before I get into all that, just say what I'm talking about. So, I talked before about how when a brethren cultivates, is being disciplined on his spiritual deen, is being chaste, being celibate, not having sex with women, not entertaining lustful thoughts towards women, being tremendously disciplined with his body, mind, heart, and spirit. Increasingly powerful. Elephant in must. Comprehensively, body, mind, heart, and spirit. Power, energy, strength, healing powers. And additionally, and in that experience, like I mentioned before, a man is less immediately attracted to an older woman, an adult woman, even 18, 19 years old, because it's so easy to see the corruptions that she's already in. She's dime, bomb, body banging, face popping. Everything is on point. But at the same time, it's so transparent. Like, particularly if she's displaying herself in a certain way or otherwise, it's like it's not even like a temptation. Like, the body is banging. She is pretty, sexy all day, but it's not a temptation because it's like you can see who she's with just the other day. You can see like what her thoughts are at that moment. And it's not even, it's like you can see what the trouble is, the challenges are, getting caught up and otherwise. Okay. All right, I'm gonna get a little. This might seem like a little bit of a side note, but this is actually something that I intended to share beforehand, so I'll include it here and then get back to the topic of the sisterin, the virgin sisterin, God willing. So it's not a temptation because it's easy to see Like, without her being disciplined, and it's not absolute. It's not saying banging women walking down the street is just like it's a death trap automatically, but it's that susceptibility. And um, without the discipline, without her having that discipline, um, it's severe consequences for the man. And when men aren't disciplined, it's further difficult for men to see that. It's like, yo, if it's an opportunity, yo, you are, what you talking about? Of course, because the man it doesn't see. He's caught up in just that the notion of the experience and the anticipation of that, not just the sexual gratification, but like everything he can say afterwards. Yeah, da 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 da. No, no, let me get a picture because he wants. It's a status thing. It's a low low value of self, and this need of like proving himself by showing one of his sexual conquests and then getting status amongst his brethren. Serious status. Yo, what? Serious? Oh, da 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 da. That's like, again, the low self-esteem kind of situation. But it's very difficult for a man to like get beyond that, because that's how susceptible a man's mind is and his body follows. So, but when he cultivates that deen, he sees like, wait, hold up, nah. Like, he sees the body count, and you think that's just a euphemism. So he's like, yeah, nah. Now, there may be, again, he might say, we know, if I talk with her, if she's willing to like learn this way or whatever, and that might seem very pejorative or whatever, but like, we're skipping past the PC right now. And because he says that on her side, if she's willing to like study and learn, be disciplined, he can have a significant amount of motivation for sharing what he knows about life and discipline and healthiness in this life. But at the same time, he also has to be honest with himself, because like how long can he be disciplined in being in her energy? And so he has to call himself out, be like, yo, okay, I can try, but yo, if we have that situation where we're alone, I don't know. And so when he's on his deen, he knows like, okay, it's less of a question, it's less of a temptation. To be honest, what a man looks for is a young sister who's still in her father's house, who still is in that semblance of protection, still in that experience of protection, honoring her father, listening to her father, being humble, modest. She's not out on the streets. She's not out in the hot spots and everything else like that. She's at home, being virtuous, comparatively speaking, cooking, cleaning, being with her more, being with her aunties, and being with her young nieces and nephews and cousins and siblings, brothers and sisters, and being in her and cultivating her motherly, nurturing ways. That's what a healthy man is looking for, because that's what a healthy man needs. And that type of sistren is typically not the sistren who's walking around displaying sexual prowess and additionally. And so the man on his deen, on his spiritual discipline, knows that intuitively, such that it's zone. Now, that being said, there's still that susceptibility, because the zone is not invincible. And the further he avails himself to the influences, the further enveloped in the game and otherwise, and the further susceptible to the convincings of, oh, I'll just talk with her, and there it is. So there's that. Further along those lines, when we talk about 15 and 16-year-old sister not being completely corrupt, meaning that once a sister gets out of her house, particularly at university or otherwise, she's in the world, and she is of the world. So there are certain. Okay, I'm going to say this from the young brethren side. For the 15, 16-year-old young brethren, who start to have that experience of women, who start to have that knowledge about woman and women. Initially, when he's living in his parents' house, when he goes to university, he experiences the protections of his parents' house and the protections of his university. Again, not invincibility, but protections. So women interacting on a daily basis, attractive young women, marriage prospects on a daily basis. And whenever he avails himself to temptation and has a physical relationship with a woman, a sexual interaction, whether it's boyfriend, girlfriend, one night stands, hit and quit, or whatever, when he has sexual intercourse with a woman, he has to pay. And one way or another, he pays from his own life. The people in his own life begin to disappear. The opportunities for the people in his life disappear. His life begins to disappear. When he divests himself, it's one thing to divest himself from his life force, and his life disappears. And it's seemingly in an increasingly diluted way. It's not as severe. When he has direct sexual intercourse with a woman, and he expends his seed accordingly, even if he doesn't expend his seed, but particularly when he expends his seed, one, he is enslaving himself to that woman in this life. Facts. When he's having sex with a woman, and the further amount of sex, the further intimate the sex, the further perverse the sex, the further he is enslaving himself to that woman. Facts. That's one thing. When he expends his seed, the further weak he becomes. He expends his life. When he expends his seed, he expends his life. So it's a dual thing. It's a compounded thing. When he has sex with a woman, he's enslaved to her. When he expends his seed, he is weakened. His power is withdrawn. Now, the woman can be a different type. They're all different types of slave owners. They're friendly slave owners, they're mean, nasty slave owners, and otherwise. And every time a man has sex with a woman, he is becoming further and further enslaved to that woman in an earthly sense. When he's having sex with many women, if he has sex with a woman, just one woman, or just once with a woman, and then there's that, wherever, if it's just a hit and quit one night stand, doesn't matter. For the rest of his life, he is a slave to that woman. And it might be a comparatively, well, it might not be as severe as like having sex for 20 times for like a week, and then her bouncing. It's not such a rote type of thing, but they're factors of intensity. One is who the woman is and what she's already experiencing, what her personality is, and not just what her personality is, but like what her life experience is, and additionally. And just because you look at her doesn't tell what her costs are. So that's one thing. And the other is that the further often, again, he has that sexual intimacy with her, the further enslaved he is to her. So she may be benign, and the nature of the enslavement might just be, okay, you have to work for this cause, or you have to do this, or otherwise, and then like abide by this for the rest of life. It might be a comparatively mundane kind of thing, and then the further he enslaves himself to her, the further intense it may become. That's one scenario. It may be a matter of like he has sex with her once, and the penalty, I won't say cost. We'll just say the cost. We won't get into penalty, but the cost for that one sex is his life. It's death. She leaves his room, and afterwards somebody else comes in, boom, and the brethren's gone. Facts. Well, I won't say facts to that scenario, but that is one of the costs, depending upon who the woman is, and how corrupt she is, how gone from life she is, how depowered she is, and otherwise. And she could be banging, pretty and everything else like that, smooth and gentle and soft. And when she leaves the room, it's time to pay the piper. So that's what a man avails himself. That's what young brethren avail themselves to, ourselves to. Yes, when I'm that age. Now, like I said, young brethren who are in the family's house have further protections, so that that cost is bared amongst his relatives, the elder males, his father, his uncles, or whatever, who bear whatever that cost may be, who are willing to do that because it's still prospects, it's part of the game. So they bear that cost. Again, we talk about the servants, the au pairs, and the surrogate wife situation within traditional communities. Again, that's bearing the cost. So a young brethren living in his house, even at university, has certain protections of that absorb some of those costs. When a young brethren graduates or is out of school, and additionally and is further on his own, he is on his own, and he has to bear those costs on his own. And he might, and when a man has the sex and has a knowledge of woman, he has further knowledge about these consequences, about the cost, and so it slows him up often. Some might become picky, and some might be just save up until be able to be only with dimes, and then like figure out what the cost is, and like when that piper comes, yo, I got something for you, piper, and fight accordingly. So I mean, that's levels to the game, but the point is, the costs become further severe as a man matures in life, and because of that, men start to slow up and hesitate, or think twice, or otherwise, or get reborn, get re-devoted to a spirituality, whatever else. And that includes myself, and not necessarily because that was my intention, but without having guidance otherwise, that's what it is. So and that's when I'm in my 20s. Now, amidst that, what is observed about the mainstream, about like the masses of people, is that when people get to that age, late teens, early 20s, all university students, that's like a hyperactivity of this game, and it's already, once kinfolk leave high school and get to university stage, the vast majority, like probably 95%, are not virgins, and thus, because not virgins, are already in that game of like trying to be predatory and be influential, and again, still optimizing options, and then devaluing otherness, and often still looking for a marital partnership, but it's predators searching for marital trust and commitment amidst other predators. So it's a very precarious thing, and obviously still also often lends itself into divorce even years later after a marriage. Children become anchors, that provide cosmic support for the parents amidst the ongoing competition, because it don't stop, and the increasing corruptions. So that's some of it. That's a lot. That's somewhat here and there, but it seems to be generally clear. The brethren John Trudell says coherent, to try to be as coherent as possible. So I think that's is maybe not necessarily the most concise or like linear in terms of organization or whatever, in terms of the thought and the rationale, but there does seem to be a fair amount of coherence in this. So now going back to the virgin experience with the sistren. The basic joint of that is this: amidst the corruptions that I just described, and amidst like its body, its mind, its spirit, its heart, and people get hardened, people get put up their armor, and break out their weapons, and get into it. Love is a battlefield. Pat Benatar. Love is not a battlefield. Selfishness, narcissism, lust is a battlefield, and that's what many kinfolk are enveloped in and calling it love. Oh, we're about to get into Juma already. All right. So, in those conditions, when people do like sober up, wake up, and want healthy, like genuinely commit towards being healthy, like when a man does that, like when I do it a number of years ago, it's a matter of like understanding what healthy is. Woody. Understanding what actually healthy behavior is, healthy relationship is, and then once understanding it, actually believing, like, is this actually possible? I mean, that's like seems like a fairy tale, and I don't feel like listening to any further fairy tales in my life at this point. Um, and then when trying to find evidence, like who else is doing this? Who can I trust? Not just I want to hear this. Like who can I genuinely believe is actually doing this? The monks, that's not it. That's something else. Who's on that path of like committed relationship and this, that, and the other, and that can be difficult to find. But usually, it's found within people who are practicing a very conservative spirituality, ethical discipline or otherwise. But usually, ethical discipline founded in a spiritual practice. Um, and that it's like, oh wait a minute, do I have to do all that to be just have that? So. Otherwise, again, finding one's position in the competition, the armor, and everything else. When one takes off one's armor, in the battlefield, when one takes off one's armor, and one throws down one's weapons and is just walking amidst the battlefield, that's what it is. That's what this honesty and cringe and everything else is. Vulnerability. And to be honest, is actually less. It's less amount of vulnerability. There is vulnerability, but what it actually is just leaving life. To be honest, not like I'm out. I'm out. It may not be absolutely out at this moment because there's still this, but it's like, yeah, nah. I'm into the heavenly, into the celestially. So I left the world, and the reason why it's less a matter of vulnerability because it's like comparatively inconsequential, and that's not meant to be hardcore or whatever else. It's just the actuality. So it's not a matter of like, it's not a matter of being invincible. It's not a matter of even not having any fear of suffering or frustration or suffering or torture or pain or anything else like that. But it's just a very like focusing on something else. So being comparatively indifferent to the casualty or the prospect of experiencing casualty on the battlefield, because it's just a recognition of the further. So it is walking around without the armor and without actually it is, one can still hold on to armor somewhat. That's another thing, but definitely without the weapons. And in doing that, like the battlefield slows up, it's easier to avoid the fights, and you can see the quiet spots. Wait, nobody's fighting over there. Let me just sit down over there and just be quiet. Oh wait, hold up, they're starting to come over here. All right, let me just like make my way. No, excuse me, no, that's okay. No, I said no. I'm not fighting. Boom, push cats away or whatever. Like no, I'm not coming at you, man. I'm just saying, don't come at me. I'm just going over there, up on that hill right there. It's quiet. I'm gonna sit in the grass over there. Haha. So that's what it is, in the thing with the relationships and everything else. Now, in that circumstance, there are women and children on the field. there are parents and families on the field, in the battlefield. And in that experience, a lot of the parents have their armor on, have their weapons, and are strong and formidable, because the men on the battlefield tend to be weak, to be honest. And so, and again, this is not just a physical thing. This is a comprehensive body, mind, heart, and spirit. So the parents are on the battlefield, and they got their armor, they got their weapons, they're still in it, they're in the game, but at the same time they have their children. So they have to like they get powered by the children who are in like the circle of the wagons, and the parents like fend off the brethren in the circle, and whilst the children are able to kind of just sit quietly, either oblivious doing what they do in the circle or kind of observing what's going on around. The boys particularly tended to be oblivious and read, have their head in books or devices or whatever else, and but the girls quietly observe and play with the dolls and imitate what's going on in the field with the dolls through coded language, and additionally because when the veil is lifted, the girls are further proximate with it. So the girls will have very strong motivation for keeping that veil. So let's play tea, and let's play house, and let's play with dolls properly. Now, that being said, when girls become mature and start to have menstruation, that is the expulsion of the life force of the woman at that point. And so the woman, beyond her own volition, starts to migrate into the battlefield, beyond the protections of her parents. Same thing with a boy, but he still has further will to stay within the circle. Haha. It doesn't happen every month. It happens when he wants, generally speaking. So when a woman's life force begins to regularly flow from her with the cycles of the moon, she is drawn into the battlefield beyond the protections of her parents. And she has to find out where she can connect. Who can she connect? What warriors on the battlefield can she connect with? What groups that are doing it as well can she connect with? Sometimes the parents might have a clan or a sangha or a minion, and there's collectors, so that rather than just immediately migrating to the battlefield, she can connect with another young brethren who is in that clan system, that tribe, without that prospect of going outside into the battlefield, into the wilderness of civilization. But when a woman doesn't have that effective tribe, and we don't have time for the pretenses and the pretend stuff of people who say this, and we're talking about thorough tribe, discipline on their deen collectively, genuinely. When a woman is without that, it's her family, it's her immediate house, and there's that further draw, that's further susceptibility, that further experience of being drawn directly into the battlefield. And so when she's in that experience, it's a slow thing, generally speaking. Sometimes it's fast, sometimes it's being thrown out by her own parents or sacrificed by her own parents. But when she's in that process and she's seeing what's happening, and she's seeing how beyond her own control and will, she's being drawn into it. She's looking around and seeing where that viable prospect is. And she might see warriors and see which warriors are stronger, and see who she can connect herself with, and how she can accommodate her ways, and how he could accommodate her ways, to be able to be in proper relationship with each other, so that they can have children and that they can be their own circle and further. So that's kind of the standard experience within secular culture, secular society, that isn't tribalism, that isn't religiosity, that is predominantly individualism. That's a pervasive, seemingly preponderant experience and scenario. Now, that being said, within that scene, there are few occasions, because there are fewer brethren, to our knowledge, there are fewer brethren who are on that spiritual path of throwing off the armor, throwing off the weapons. And so when the young sistren who are in their family circles, have the ability of seeing those brethren off on the cut, on the grass, or in the distance, or whatever else. And it's like light on the battlefield, the darkness of the battlefield. And so there's a natural, again, doom, doom, and the brethren in the battlefield can see the sistren in the circle. So I see. Don't have to be so obvious or whatever else, but there it is. Now, the prospect of such a sistren being married, even just being able to get to that brethren in the knoll or whatever else, it may be further plausible, it may be less plausible than if for her to attach herself with a prominent warrior, a warrior on a horse, a warrior with a chariot, or otherwise, with a particular section of a military, the archers or whatever else. So there are different characteristics, and just because a brethren is out in the field on his own with light and strength and everything else, doesn't necessarily mean that's the most prudent, practical selection for Sistren who sees him. But there are certain advantages. But it does also take the same process of accommodation, of acclimation, and her like understanding, like how does he stay still? How does he keep the kinfolk away from him? How does he find the quiet places? And when he has the necessity of moving from one place to another, how does he navigate through that? And then how can the Sistren do that with him? That's much of what's involved. Now, one of the other things I talk about in terms of that connection, the telepathic vibe between the older spiritual man on his deen and the younger sister, and particularly virgin, with the powers of karma and cosmos and otherwise. One way to like articulate this again. I mean, what I just said, it kind of like stands on its own. So I'll just leave it at from a moment. Now we just like do like a restatement in a different way. One thing that can be recognized is that in many ways, young sistren, young girls, very often live in their own world. To different degrees, some further than others, some further intense than others. But young girls have a very, compared to other people, men, women, youth, and even young boys, young girls have an increased propensity for the imaginary realm, the dream realm, in the wakeful state of just like living or observing and even articulating and entertaining just a dreamy type of existence. And some people call it imagination, some people call it delusions or whatever else. But girls, compared to other types of categories of people, boys, youth, adults, men, or women, girls have an increased, one could say, luxury or capability because of living in one's house and the securities therein, generally speaking, comparatively speaking. A girl has an increased a propensity for imagination and delving herself in an imaginary experience whilst awake. And when experiencing life, applying that imagination, applying that dreamfulness to the conditions of life. Again, we're talking about first love, and when a young girl, even before puberty, sees a boy or sees a young man or whatever, and just having all these dreams and all these notions, and additionally, and articulating that, and for better or for worse, but just doing that. That's part of what I'm talking about in terms of girl and living increasingly in a dream world, having that further capability and luxury of living in a dream world, and living in a dream world, and then also perceiving the world as a dream, and worrying less about the competitions and the pragmatics and everything else, but just perceiving the world as a dream and living like that. So young girls have an increasing availability to do that compared to boys, who many boys can be eccentric and have that kind of proclivity, but many boys are either oblivious and either one just preparing to be men and doing what one is told and doing the work, or are just like caught up in like discovering the world. And that's the difference between discovering the world and perceiving the world as a dream. So boys can be up and be very imaginative and adventurous and have all this creativity, but it's a way of discovering the world, rather than having like an adult mind, or I shouldn't say adult mind, but rather than having like a mature awareness of the world and perceiving the world or viewing the world increasingly as a dream, and then living according to the vision, that dream vision of the world. So girls have that further tendency than boys do, um, and definitely youth getting further caught up in senses and competition, and then the adults already getting enveloped in the corruptions and the hardenedness, and not having the luxury of like imaginations or fancifulness, and instead like, yo, we gotta put food on the table, we gotta deal with these security issues and everything else like that. So girls tend to be along those lines. Now that being said, again, the brethren on his deen, spiritual deen, in additionally, is also has a similar tendency, capacity for observing, recognizing, viewing, perceiving the world as a dream, or world as dream. And depending upon the path, it can be articulated or contextualized within the notions and teachings and theologies of Maya, or the garden, or other traditional frameworks. However, again, when a brethren, again, lets go of life, lets go of the competition, lets go of his armor and his weapons, he further immerses himself in that experience of the world as a dream. And because of that, again, those are two components, two types of beings within society, girls and men on the spiritual path, that have that proclivity towards seeing world as dream, and thus when seeing each other in that view of world as dream, that seeing of each other has that vibration accordingly, amidst all the battlefield activity going on at the same exact time. So that's what I'm speaking of. Now, for the spiritual man, it's necessary for him to stay on his deen and not fall to temptation, and not take advantage of that, and not try to mislead the young sister or whatever, regardless of what her age is. It's for him to stay purposeful and recognize that marriage and sexual interaction is purposeful. And just keep it at that. So, but that's what I'm speaking of. And when he is on his deen, he's increasingly susceptible to that temptation, because it's very powerful. When I can speak from my own experience, and it's not just him, it's not just sitting and running after young girls, whatever. The young girls come up, pull up. That's not ego, and that's not hyperbole. That's facts. And when that happens, the brethren has to be on his deen. And the further he is celibate and cultivating his deen, the further proximate, the further susceptible the brethren is, well, the increasing he has to be in terms of being disciplined. So, I'm just gonna leave it like that, and I'm gonna let that just like marinate and speak for itself. I think that is comparatively coherent, and I think that's going to be one of the better ways of communicating it that I can do at this moment. So, anything else to share today? I have prose. I have original prose to share. So, Alright, so this one is inspired, is articulated from the experience with the birds today. Oh, he's a bird brain. You better believe it. What I will say before getting into this is that there are two parts to this joint. I just write this whilst I've been doing my work. to be honest, and still like wrestling whether I should do it or otherwise. Um, so, anyways, this is it. It's two parts to it. There's the second part is a reprise. So, the intention is just to pause for a moment between the two parts and then um, continue. Here we go. The forest is fierce, and the daily search for bread. Some will die, some will live, midst the blue jays and the crows. The sparrows call me treacherous for my variation, piles and paucity. Yet look at the seasons, I say. Is it not the same? The sparrows retort, the seasons we know, the rains and winds as well. Your ways are different and less trustworthy than the one. Return, reprise. The sparrows come back. So now you see. I answer to the one, too. To the conditions beyond, within, and around. It's not just me. Yes, respect. Blessed love and peace, and the wings fly on. We got additional prose. This one is somewhat a work in progress. However, there is an effective amount of completion, so we're going to share it accordingly. We're just going to get into it without a title. Didn't I give at the office? Yeah. I'm sure I did. Didn't I march the other day? Didn't I march the other year? Yet today, I have a quota to fill. Pharaoh has raised the requirements and lowered the provender. And I'm trying to stack my pile. I'm trying to upgrade, uplift myself. Right? Didn't I raise my fist? That minute? Isn't that what we're doing these days? Didn't I give at the office? Yes, you did. Yet, the struggle is not your sidekick. Ah! I messed it up. That's not the lyrics. Rewind. Didn't I give at the office? Yeah, I did. The concentration, y'all. Concentration is gone. And I was just at the kicker. Blame it on the Freud. Yeah. All right, here we go. Try it again. I'm not an actor. I am not an actor. Here we go. Didn't I give at the office? Yeah, I'm sure I did. Didn't I march the other day? Didn't I march the other year? Yet today, I have a quota to fill. Pharaoh has raised the requirements and lowered the provender. And I'm trying to stack my pile. I am trying to uplift myself. right? Didn't I raise my fist that minute? Isn't that what we're doing these days? Didn't I give it the office? Yes, you did. Yet, the struggle is not your side chick. The struggle is your life. That's it. So, la-di-da. And I view the recent video again this week from downloads. There is a conversation, a speech that is given at a high school, young brethren communicating to young kinfolk at the high school. And it conjures the recollection of preceding experiences and continuing experiences, particularly graduation speeches, when people visit graduation. So this wasn't a graduation speech. This seemed to be just like this was the Brethren Ryan Alexander Holmes giving a talk at a high school, at a gymnasium with mixed folk. It seemed to be comparatively informal, but it reminds me of speeches that I participate in, that I observe through the years. I'm reminded of Wong Fu, like 10, 15 years ago, being a popular, it's not inaugural address, but giving like the key, it's not a keynote speech, whatever it is that the guest gives at the graduation ceremonies. But this is what occurs. This is what occurs. Speeches, speeches. Particularly these days. But it seems very prudent, appropriate. I haven't seen this, to be honest. It may be happening, but I haven't heard about it. I'm not in the know that much either. So either way, here it is. Here's the idea. Here's the consideration. Here's the suggestion. The humble. It's this. Rather than doing a graduation speech, you can still invite a keynote speaker or whatever at the graduation ceremony. But rather than doing a speech, how about like this? How about doing a graduation powwow? How about doing a graduation reasoning session? And instead of electing the speaker for the class or whatever that the student body does, rather than like the president or whatever of the class body being the speaker, the official speaker for it, how about the president of the class being like the moderator or a participant in a conversation with the keynote speaker in front of the class, in front of the graduating class? And how about like the graduating class, when there is that notion of selecting speakers, selects who gets to be in that cipher? Circle up and then have a conversation in front of the crowd, 10, 15, 20 minutes, however that is, 30 minutes, about something that's relevant for the community, relevant for the class and the kinfolk who are graduating, and the families, the supporters, and everybody else. That seems like much further, just the culture today, and further meaningful, rather than just like being inspired, sitting back, being passive, clapping, oh yeah, and just like, oh, that's a big name person. That's all it is at this point. The university trying to get the biggest name, credentials, and then the participants just like, oh, they had such and such. Oh, that must be a rather connected institution. So rather than just relying on, and that's it, like kinfolk, how much, I do remember was done on my graduations, kind of, sort of, and I remember being thoroughly unimpressed, to be honest. I didn't go to business school, but for undergrad and for both undergrad and law school, very prominent speakers, but comparatively unimpressed. That's not shade, but that's just facts. But instead, I probably would be unimpressed probably by anybody, to be honest. That's not true, but the vast majority of people who would be the most readily candidates for that type of thing. But anyways, suggestion is for what I refer to as the bastion of apartheid, class apartheid today. So just had to throw in, that wasn't a dig at university, that's a dig at myself for being perceived or perceivably hypocritical for saying how bad quote unquote university is, but then giving a suggestion how it can be better. Is that not logical, or is that not hypocritical, or is it both? Anyways, continuing on, it just seems so logical and so beneficial for universities to have like a powwow, to have a graduation powwow on stage, not a speaker but a powwow, and invite a marquee speaker, invite a marquee leader within society who's inspirational, that students want to see, the validation of that person coming in, all that, the credentials are still there, but rather than that person talking, that person being a featured participant within the cipher, and even saying like what the topic is. If that person is like an engineer doing some avant-garde stuff, then have the conversation about that, have a topic about that, and then like ask a question, and maybe like the keynote, the student speaker, the student elected speaker or whatever, asks like the discussion question for the entire circle, and not just doing like a panel thing or whatever, but like a discussion for 20-30 minutes. That seems like very valuable, and takes less weight off the speaker himself or herself, because they don't have to prepare something now, but at the same time they do have to prepare to be in that conversation. But that just seems so much further memorable, so much further substance, so much further recording worthy, and like, yo, I want to see that conversation. What are they talking about? Yeah, what the leader is talking about, but also because oftentimes, again, people get invited to those joints and like they don't even know that university. They don't know anybody graduating. I mean, what's the meaningfulness in that, genuinely speaking, other than just like congratulations and shoot for the stars and blah 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 blah. Well, this is the University of Peace, and we don't shoot things here. Anyway. That's one idea, that's one consideration. I talked before already about the whole multi-center, multicultural retreat center thing. Somewhat so, I do before. And continuing, but I'm off projects at this point. I'm on this last project, God willing, and I'll do this. We have open recruitment. We can utilize administrators and staff, and additionally, in helping to put many of these projects together. We got stacks of projects, stacks of ideas, stacks of initiatives, stacks of materials, educational materials, publication materials, and additionally, not trying to make money. We're not on the numbers game. We're on the names game. We emphasize the names. So we're working towards cultivating relationship with community. And providing and sharing the things accordingly. That being said, one of the things that we look at is connecting with specific groups, like within Scandinavia. Actually, I'm not going to get into all the details right now, because it is getting to be Juma, and so. But the point here is like sharing culture, sharing education, world lit. And also based upon the geoguessing brethren with like Rainbolt, and additionally what we observe is an increasing affinity towards world knowledge, and the propensity of strengthening the world knowledge and providing further substance to the world knowledge by including things like the omniglots and the geoguessing sphere, and boom. And further kinfolk who are doing these kind of like having a certain knowledge about the world in a comparatively finite way, often based upon experiences of imperialism. Looking at geoguessing, it's very much based upon the infrastructure provided from imperialism. So there's that continuing kind of like hedging between like being transcending cosmopolitanism, but at the same time having a credential that's translatable to conventional employment later in life and further. So that's recognized as not hating, but just observing that. So because what we emphasize is like, that's cool, it's interesting. I just like further learn about that whole endeavor. Yet at the same time, what we emphasize in our walk is like nature, knowing the rivers, knowing what the rivers look like, knowing what the nature, what the trees, identifying the trees, rather than being able to identify telephone poles and telephone pole markings, and additionally, which is interesting and has its own rationale and explanation, and provides some insight concerning municipalities, administrations, and philosophies and policy trends, and additionally, Brethren talks about CI having a different knowledge about the world than what geoguessing does, so that's recognizable. But even then, CIA is not the standard, even when they make books that concerning statistics and otherwise that the world utilizes, particularly academia. That ain't it either. Nature, the rivers, the plants, the animals, being able to identify those. I'm still working like, what is that tree right over there? I can say maples, and sometimes I can say oaks, but just knowing the known nature where we live. Table Mountain is beautiful and awesome. Yes, I've been there myself. We have recommendations. Probably, I don't even know if you're still in the land of the Masa at the moment. But that your prospective journeys that you were talking about, thinking about doing before Kilimanjaro, Namibia. No, you said Namibia. You said Botswana and Zimbabwe. We done did that. I'm like, yo, you taking it from our travel book, but that's beautiful. Hallelujah. And we have suggestions along these ways, particularly visiting the nature reserves and like seeing a giraffe in person, not behind a cage, seeing an elephant in person, not behind a cage, walking freely, comparatively speaking, in must or otherwise. That's too much. Anyways, in terms of geoguessing, rather than just focusing on infrastructure, it's a limited knowledge about the ways of the world, the way of the world. We encourage the consideration of nature, being able to do the similar things, similar feats with the fjords and otherwise, and being able to discern like the rock formations and otherwise. You speak about some of that in terms of the dirt and soil and being able to detect what the difference between the land of Benin and the land of Guarani, Brazil. However, like focusing on that thorough, because that's actually further timeless. And further lucrative, to be honest, because it's not just lucrative, it's healthy, and healthy is lucrative. So, particularly in the trends of civilization and the eventuality of returning to healthy water. So that knowledge of nature is extremely valuable in that process. Pioneering into what we previously are. So that's some of the knowledge that we share, but we also see the games, the competitions, the tournaments. That's valuable methodology, recognizing the connection with the youth and what youth are accustomed to. Yet again, rather than us doing it in a geoguessing context or whatever, what we look at is doing it in a world lit context. So focusing on legends of the world civilization. I mean, focusing on geography. Geography is a big part of what we do too. Again, knowledge of the rivers and what's around the rivers. And then from that, languages. And it's interesting, we didn't see a lot of overlap between Omniglot and geoguessing. Omniglot we recognize is increasingly established for perhaps a further number of years, because it looks like geoguessing is predominantly predicated upon Google. How about that? Google Maps or whatever it is, the satellite imagery, whatever, or not satellite imagery, but the car vehicle thing. So it's comparatively recent in years for there to be a discipline forming around that. It is another one. I remember looking at Google Maps years ago, like 5-6 years ago, whenever it starts, and just thinking, wow, that's an amazing thing. Like to be able to look around, and then there's these street views, and I remember like when that first kind of comes out, or at least when I first start seeing it, and I can see the affinity, particularly for young people who have further time to kind of just immerse oneself into that kind of thing. It's much further for myself. It's much further appealing than like video gaming and everything, which is comparatively imagining. Now the notion of AI and the difficulty of distinguishing AI from the actuality. To be honest, it's that one of the reasons of the discomfort is because the actuality of the Google photo or Google Maps, Google Street imagery is also very much enveloped in the experience of technology, rather than just, like you said, actually seeing it oneself and having that experience. Also being mindful of how you utilize the word meta, particularly when you're in Laos and in Thailand, talking with the Buddha and the Buddhists. Meta has a very different meaning and a very different direction, a very, very different orientation to be respected and appreciated. So that's part of the numbers and the name situation, even just within Western civilization and the Eastern Hemisphere. I guess it's the West Hemisphere too with the impositions. Anyways, all right, that's that. It's always politics, some way or another. But we focus on rivers, geography, the names, languages. We have a specific methodology of studying world languages, the world writing system. So it's not just romanization of everything, but the original script, the original writings from Chinese to Inuit, Mayan Inuit particularly. And then the third category of our methodology is calendars, and we get into mathematics. But even before that, in what we look at in terms of puzzles, geography, language, and legends. We have specific teachers from world civilization that we focus on. So doing trivia and things along those lines for people to have a greater literacy, world lit, concerning world civilization. And so we find the games effective way, tournaments, the framing it in a competition, a friendly competition, giving some incentives. Money is one thing, and I understand the whole thing about getting excited over 7,000 or whatever that is, but obviously, like that doesn't even buy books at many schools these days. So, and there's no competing against like the money motivator. So it's a matter of like providing motivations through other means, whether it's offering like a musical recording or musical performance, or some type of, don't want to get too bogged down by trinkets of like medallions or medals or ribbons or anything else like that, but providing something that's meaningful and like tangible and otherwise. Carrots and sticks we talking about. Mild. But again, we are focusing on multicultural retreat centers to be a focal point, a physical focal point for these studies, for these activities. Online does many things, but at the same time, we need to focus on having a space where this type of culture is supported continually, perennially. These being like pilgrimage sites for multiculturalism and pluralism, and a number of sites around the world. We've been cultivating this for a number of years. There's been ebbs and flows. So again, like partnering, a number of different categories of partnerships with multicultural, mixed heritage, kinfolk foundations. Tiger Woods was just recommended recently. Bob Marley, Bruce Lee foundations are another candidates, and communicate interest in doing cooperatives, and that's actually facts. Our connections, our relations directly with kinfolk in these administrations are vary from spot to spot. Many of our connections, particularly concerning myself and my personal relationships and networks, is I may know kinfolk who are like right there. However, at the same time, I'm off grid. I'm gray listed, and so it becomes a diplomacy thing where it's not necessarily just the direct interaction between a relationship between myself and kinfolk that I know for decades, but it's a matter of like other decision brokers that approve of those communications or arrangements otherwise. So that's part of the challenges with what I do, what IZ is. So that's part of it. Concerning national governments, like specifically again Scandinavia, Sweden, Denmark particularly, that's again my personal situation, my personal relationships and background and connections. Ethiopia, Rastafari, Ministry of Culture, India, China, with China, Singapore, Saudi Arabia, and particularly with the framework of world lit and culture and language learning, in the whole diplomacy with the Arab community in the Ummah. There are obviously a lot of different politics and a lot of different nuances with that. But again, when we talk about foundation and we're talking about civilization, it's Mecca and Medina, and so that's basically what we focus on in that respect. And we talk about Israel as well. So those are the elements. University of Peace, I mentioned before, in the land of the Mayan, in Costa Rica, care of the Arawak as well, in many respects. Um, so, anyways, that's some of like the framework, some of like the spot, like what we look at in terms of coalescing things, putting things together, and building relationship. We focus particularly for mixed heritage kinfolk of, in addition, just like an advisory council and the different caucuses or representations in the advisory council. There also being an administrative body that does the work, that does these phone calls and coordinating things. We emphasize our seasonal calendar of nature observances that occur. There are 9 observances that are bookend by the Sakurai Festival, the Cherry Blossom Festival at the beginning of the northern spring, and then the sugar maple leaf celebration towards the end of the northern autumn. And then in between those, there being 9 nature-based traditional observances within a mixed heritage culture, world culture, for strength and congruence and continuity, communication and gathering. And so those are some of the things that we emphasize. Clan is another thing that we're cultivating, learning our maternal languages, particularly as a way of strengthening our clan experience and our relationships, and just like our cosmic relationship with Creator and all our relations and ourselves, our families too. And when we do these basic things like learning the languages of our Moors, when we look at honoring the nature that provides us with nutrients, from again the cherry blossoms to the sugar maples. And again, just as a side note, sugar maples is not the time to cultivate maple syrup. That's earlier in the season. That's earlier in the year. We're talking about just the observation of autumn, and that's for particularly a time for like having the gourds kind of celebrations, and that's included within it as well. Squash being one of the 3 sisters of Native heritage. Talking about agriculture there with the black beans and corn. Anyways, and those are some of the observances, and including, I won't say all the 9, but anyways, those are some of them. Do I say all 9? We don't have all the 9, actually, to be honest. We're still working on something for cucumber. Anyway, and black bean, to be honest. So, anyway. That's a nice question to ask, actually. So again, for the Mixed Heritage World Collective, an advisory council with different components, different categories, an administrative entity that helps coordinate the communication and gathering, and then a culture of seasonal gatherings each year. And with those seasonal gatherings, there being a schedule of learning. Songs and stories, we share these and dances. Song, stories, and dances. We're going to have to add this to it. Song, stories, and dances, traditional dances, with our gatherings and our rituals. And so with that, there also being a study program, a weekly study program across the world that shares world literacy, so that there's some continuity just in terms of our mindfulness, and then our buildings of conversations accordingly, and from those conversations into cooperative endeavors and initiatives. So again, one of the basic things is like recognizing mixed people. In the United States particularly, like all different ethnicities, African, European, Mediterranean, Asian, South Asian, East Asian, even Native, each ethnic group, along all the boxes, each ethnic group has professional organizations: National Association of Black Accountants, National Association of Black Journalists, and further. So there's that for every different type of ethnicity, basically speaking, as well. There has yet to be that observed for mixed people, and it's just logical. It's very natural. It's very legitimate, and it has yet to exist. And there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of mixed people on this earth. There are hundreds of millions of mixed people in the United States at this moment. So there's a strong necessity, and there's a strong suppression of that, as I've mentioned before. So the necessity is increasingly outweighing the suppression, and so we are in that position of guiding the necessities into actualities. And so part of it at the moment is just articulating it. Some people have skill sets, some people have availability. I have I have skill set, I have less availability. So that means that it's for me to share the knowledge of the skill set for those who have greater availability, young kinfolk, and particularly young kinfolk who are willing or who are ready to commit to this and make a livelihood from this. There's a livelihood to be made from this, just coordinating and otherwise. So, but it requires honesty, because we know, well, I won't get into the whole co-option kind of thing, but we share, we continue to share, but we have yet to see the results from this. So we are less inclined towards secretive, because again, the secrets are illusions. But there seems to be this necessity of confidentiality, of not just sharing everything, because there's an increasing susceptibility for it being squandered. So we're working to find the balance accordingly, because again, our protocols of sharing are not from this world, and are not limited to the world motivations and parameters. So meaning we have an obligation to share. We don't have to share everything, and we don't have to share everything all the time, but we do have an obligation to share. And if we don't share, we have to have a strong reason why we don't. And again, we don't share everything all the time, but we have to have a reason. In the meanwhile, we have to share a lot further than what is normal and otherwise, and there's a lot of vulnerability. So again, we have faith and we focus on truth. We're not invincible, but that's what we do. So that's some of it. Don't have no notes. Too tough. I mean, at least that I'm referring to at the moment. Again, emphasis is on cultural education, song stories, dances. We have a working curriculum for each of these. Some of it is further established than others, but it's all very thorough all together. And again, having a place, a formal place, a safe and a secure place, is very conducive to the learning, to teaching the teachers to do further study. And again, when kinfolk have a knowledge about how we share and further what we share, it's a matter of, okay, now let's set up another Kulturhus in Denmark, or let's set up another community center or multicultural retreat center in España, and in Japan, in China, in India, in Ghana, in Ethiopia, in the land of the Guarani in Brazil, and around each place where there's high concentrations of mixed people, mixed activity, and otherwise, multiculturalism and further. So that's it. We're into Juma now. That's our dress for today, in our experience of rather worldly dawa. So all over the place in the conversation. Nature helps to ground it. Nature helps to root it. Nature helps to support it. Discipline, modesty helps nature to grow. Honesty and compassion helps us to share. Honesty, compassion, and modesty helps us to share further and longer. I can add one of the components of what we share within our multiculturalism period. Our educational paradigm is scriptural reasoning. Now, we recognize not everybody's ready for the scriptural reasoning joint. However, it does also provide, again, that substance and that anchor for what we do and what we share. So, we share the ideas, we provide the invitation, we emphasize cooperation and mutual support. We respect our differences, we celebrate our differences. We advise honesty and ancestry within our mindfulness and intentions, and I feel the obligatory yeah in the YouTube parlance. Language study. That's one thing I can also say I do this week is start learning or further learn the language of my matrilineal clan, which is the Bison, Northern Europe. That's what it is. So specifically Svensk. So that's what I'm learning. Sverige. So now I'm guided, I'm charged to be further literate in the language of Svensk, because that is my matrilineal clan affiliation. And same thing for anybody from anywhere. Now, in addition, I have other priorities and protocols in terms of language learning, including Amharic and Chinese, particularly. I also have certain proficiency already in a number of languages, being literate in Hebrew, generally Arabic, generally Devanagari, generally Gurbani, which I guess is related or technically a form of Devanagari or a derivative thereof. So that's one of the reasons why the emphasis of Amharic and Chinese Mandarin, particularly, in addition to the Sverige or the Sverige, I keep saying Sverige, Svensk language. Also, my Muskogee heritage. So we emphasize in our methodology, again, the primary, aside from one's working language, what one grows up speaking most readily within just life, particularly as an adult, when one is cultivating this experience of mixed heritage and like returning to one's heritage, we emphasize learning primarily one's matrilineal language. That's the clan affiliation, and connecting with other people who speak that matrilineal language. That's further strengthening and rooting, particularly as mixed heritage kinfolk collectively, because we each have our own matrilineal language and clans. But when we work together, then we share the benefit of that collective, and we're further rooted and substantiated within our experience as well. In addition to that, in addition to our matrilineal clan language and affiliation, we also emphasize and encourage kinfolk to learn the additional languages of kinfolk's tribes and ethnicities. For myself, that includes, again, Amharic as well as Twi, but Amharic particularly for African people of African ancestry to learn as a writing system, to learn any African language. So it's Amharic, Amharic from Ethiopia, and Muskogee, Seminole, Hebrew, and that what? Now that I think about it, actually, Dansk is another one, and Irish, Gaelic is another one. But those are the main ones. Well, I can't say those are the main ones, but those are ones that I'm focusing on at the moment in terms of my personal, ethnic, familial heritage and ancestry. In addition to that, in terms of geopolitics and ongoing, burgeoning family relations and otherwise, it includes Chinese, Arabic, Sanskrit, Devanagari, particularly. So those are the languages that I personally focus on. We have an outline and a curriculum of, I think I have to always remember, 16 languages. And it's not 16 languages, it's actually 16 writing systems. There are many languages based upon these writing systems, but it is a core of the writing systems of the world to have even just a basic literacy of the vast reaching numbers of languages around the world. So it's further accessible than what many may perceive initially. And it's not a matter of like being absolutely fluent in all the different languages, but it's a matter of at least having a familiarity, a very effective and beneficial familiarity. So that's part of our methodology of education. And that being said, we're going to bounce. We're going to say Juma Mubarak, Shabbat Shalom. I have to look at the calendar to see it. I'm off my game in that respect in terms of what else is going on this week and on this day in terms of ritual observances. However, all thanks and praise to the Most High. Blessed love and peace in Rastafari.